Welcome to the International Schools Podcast. I'm your co host, John Mickton. Dan has been at Bet and is traveling and will be joining us at a later date. So, as all of you are aware, this is March, and by March, so many things have changed in the AI landscape. It's accelerated, it changes every day. And as I think just an educator or a school leader on the sidelines, because in many ways we are on the sidelines as much as these products suddenly show up in our ecosystems. If you're in the Google workspace or in the Office 365, or somebody that spends a little extra money on ChatGPT or many of the other ones like Claude, Perplexity, etc. You kind of watch this, and sometimes it feels like you have to take a deep breath just to keep up and really understand things. And there's only so much we can synthesize with our busy schedules as educators. We know we're super busy. School leaders are super busy. There's so many things coming at us all day, and we're really in the moment, really focused on kids and learning, and as leaders thinking about the community and the staff. So really, where is the space to really think about all this? It's sometimes challenging. So I feel very excited because today we have Francis Hoang as our guest. And Francis is a veteran, an entrepreneur. He's been a technology innovator with a passion for leadership, education, and ethical use of AI. He's a founding member of multiple companies across AI, and currently Boodlebox AI. He's the co-founder and co-CEO. He's worked in law and defense. He was in the military. He's helped teams harness technology for real-world impact. He has over 20 years of national security experience, including roles in the White House and the U.S. Army Special Forces. So he just brings so many insights into leadership and strategic thinking. And I think as a West Point and Georgetown law graduate, really Francis can kind of help us unpack some of these things that maybe many of us are feeling, because he's working in the industry. Is this kind of idea of resilience, and what does the future hold? And as educators, where do we sit and what can we do? And so, Francis, today, thank you so much for being part of the International Schools Podcast.
John, thank you for having me. It's great to be here. I'm already excited just based on all the things you just mentioned. I'm chomping at the bit to get started.
So, Francis, tell us, when you think, as I was saying at the beginning, AI is moving at this pace that often exceeds, I think, for me as an educator, my understanding. I mean, I read, I listen to podcasts, and I feel I'm trying to keep up, but it's quite hard. You, as a leader and an entrepreneur of an AI company that's working also with educational groups, what are some of the ethical and human challenges that you face when you talk to schools and your business and your teams, and as you develop your own AI product?
Yeah, John, great question. First off, let me just say, I too feel whiplash, right? And I'm a co-founder of a Gen AI company at the cutting edge, and I feel like it's hard to keep up. So I can totally appreciate that, that everybody probably listening to this podcast feels that way. There's this term back, I don't know if you remember, in the 60s, 70s, future shock, right? That the future was coming so fast that we were being overwhelmed. I feel like there's AI shock at the moment. I also have to say, my background includes both AI. My AI company has been doing AI before AI was cool. We've now pivoted and focused really on this idea of collaborative AI. How can multiple people, multiple AIs work together in a responsible way? But also education. I've been a trustee of a university. I'm a distinguished visiting lecturer at West Point. So I've spent plenty of time in classrooms, and I feel it as well, right? I feel like, wow, things are changing fast. Our driving motivation for building our platform, Boodlebox, was we felt there was just too much AI in AI. That technology platforms that were coming out were so focused on the technology, they were losing sight of the most important part of the technology, which is the people using it. And so we really wanted to build a platform that encouraged versus discouraged human interaction and really enable people to work better together, right? Both with AI and with other people. There are a lot of ethical questions that are emerging because of the AI, revolution. I think one of the principal ones that really drives at the heart of education, right, is where does AI kind of end and where does the person begin, right? We have the ability to cognitively offload things, right? So think about it, like calculators are often used as as a corollary for AI, right? We learn multiplication, but at some point we don't do multiplication by hand anymore. We offload that, right? And we assume that you know how to do multiplication and you use these tools to your advantage, a calculator. But you still have to know how multiplication works. I think there's a big question of what does learning and teaching look like now that we have these tools that allow students to massively offload things that they used to have to do themselves. And I think part of the challenge in hundreds of conversations with educators and my own experience is sometimes we don't want it easy, right? Education is about friction, right? It's not about getting to the answer. It's not about getting the answer. It's about how you get to the answer. And so I think we live in a world now where process matters more than product. And that is going to raise all kinds of issues for how we teach and how students learn.
So and thank you for that, when you talk about that, you say that, a lot of technology companies are thinking technology and not about the human interface and what is the role of the human, how do we ensure the human voice and the human disposition is still part of that? And you talk about that creative tension between the border of technology. And I completely agree with you that process is, working with students. And I know many of our audiences, it's the process is kind of design thinking idea of in the process, that's where the deep thinking and critical thinking takes place
100%.
And then the end product. But what happens is that, as you said, things are so frictionless and things are so kind of easy, and we're doing that cognitive outloading more and more, cognitive offloading. Do you think that fact that people are getting lazy might be the wrong word, are engaging with this convenience and not thinking about it, and then it becomes almost a habit, and then it becomes a way of life? How do you think educators and school leaders especially should navigate that? Because that also has to do with psychology, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh yeah, look, I've talked to many educators who felt like they were going through the 5 stages of grief with regards to their profession and the advent of AI, right? I think we saw the messages a year and a half ago, should I even teach anymore? What's my role? I firmly believe, right? Education's not dead. Educators are still important. Here's the thing about AI, right? We now live in a world, John, where we're all a B- at everything. Like if I asked you to produce this podcast in Swahili and make it about refrigerator repair, you could, like in 20 minutes, right? So it shouldn't surprise us that that students, right, have taken these tools and produced what used to be the artifacts of learning, the essay, the project, answering a quiz. And so, but here's the thing, when they do that, they can't tell the difference between a B- and an A. Like they think they produced something good, but they actually haven't. That still requires expertise. That still requires experience. So one role of education, right, is still to educate people what right looks like, right? What is the end product? And I think you've probably had the same experience I have at this point of using AI a lot. It's interesting and novel when I use it for anything, but it's really only truly useful when I actually already have domain expertise. Like I have to know what I'm doing. Otherwise, I don't know whether what I produced is actually an A or a B- because I don't have the expertise. So one role of education still is to teach what right looks like. But we also have to take into account that students can now get to a B- really quickly, right? So how do we teach students and ourselves, frankly, because it's a journey together with our students, and I believe that as well, to get to that A faster, better, more efficiently, leveraging those tools. Now, part of that journey is you don't use the tools at first, right? You have to learn how to you have to learn how to multiply without the calculator, and then you get to learn how to use the calculator. But ultimately, right, we need to do both, right? We need to understand the underlying principles, and then we need to use the tools to prepare for this AI-enabled world we're all living in now.
So it's really interesting because you say that, however you use AI, having domain expertise is really important. And I think that's always very reassuring. I know when I use AI and my specialties or my focus areas, I always look at them like, yeah, you're a little off there. I'm going to have to reprompt. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important message, is that then the role of the educator in a school context is so important, because they do have those expertise of domain, be it a science or physics. Right. There are definitely shortcuts. And I love your analogy that we're all at a B-, and how do we move it to, the A? And I think that's the thing that if we can, and I think that's what you're saying to educators and school leaders, is it's okay. Your role is still so critical
Yeah.
in this, and the toolkit that you bring is essential, because AI only works if you have that toolkit of real good domain
Mhm.
expertise, the pedagogic dispositions, the experience of working with different kids and different
Mhm.
mindsets. So I think that's super reassuring.
Hey,
But do
John, if I
you?
could jump in on one
Yeah,
thing. Yeah,
please. Yeah, please.
I think this is an interesting observation. A lot of professors love hearing this. So students are more likely, I think, than professors to have used AI and engaged AI. Here's what we find though. The moment professors start engaging and using these tools and deploying them, they find they quickly outshine their students. Like students use AI more, but it's not a very deep and nuanced use. The moment professors actually learn how these tools use, start applying their domain, start teaching and learning with it, they race past their students because they have the domain expertise, they have the life experience, they have the academic background, right? They quickly are like, no, this is actually how you use the tool in these tools in this discipline. So they find they have actually a lot to teach their students in an AI-enabled world.
And now you're talking about this idea of, teachers' expertise in domain allows them to maybe accelerate and have greater versatility with these tools.
100%.
What do you say about this, what I call kind of the professional development gap, where very likely it's the first time as educators that we
Mhm.
have a technology that both kids and us don't know anything about
Yep.
it. It comes at the same time. Oh, we have different capacities for learning. We have different
Mhm.
toolkits to allow us to
Yeah.
learn. What do you think is maybe something that schools really need to shift? Because I have a feeling that there are many educators like, yeah, I get AI, but I don't know how to use it. I don't understand the issues of
Mhm.
bias and gender,
Yeah.
etc. What would you say to a school leader about the professional development aspects of the training? Because you very likely, in your context as an entrepreneur,
Yeah.
you're also having to skill up your teams.
And every day, right? It's a constant thing. So first, I do think school, individuals should, to the extent they can, take it upon themselves and engage in self-learning and self-education. Second, schools should be providing that training and opportunities to learn and have peer-to-peer learning, frankly. But let me just take a step back. Whether that happens, and it should, here's what I encourage professors to do, right? And teachers. And look, I'm in the classroom, I feel the same way. I want to be the subject matter expert before I present something to my students, right? I want to have mastery of it. But here's what we're seeing with a lot of professors. They're letting go of that with AI. Like they're standing in front of their classrooms and saying, look, I'm not an expert. You're learning, I'm learning. This is a brave new world. Let's learn this together, right? How do you think we should use AI? How have you been using AI? Here's my ideas. What do you think about that? And they give themselves permission to not be a master of this technology in front of their students and engage with their students on a journey together. And I think that's really, really powerful if professors are willing to do that. And we've worked with many professors who've taken that tact, and they have been rewarded richly with an incredible classroom experience.
It's wonderful, that idea of the collaboration and kind of even playing field, in the sense that, hey, I don't know as much as you, but let's co-construct that. And I mean, I think we know there are a lot of pedagogic
Mhm.
theories and pedagogic approaches that says that collaborative kind of the working as equal partners. You're more a curator and a choreographer than
Mhm.
the leader and the orchestra conductor. I think that is really interesting, and I think that is almost what I'm hearing is that, to educators listening to us, give yourself permission not to
Mhm.
be an expert, but give yourself permission to take all your expertise in facilitating and mentoring and understanding how to differentiate for different types of learners, but you are working in a collaborative environment.
Yeah, I've talked to professors who literally just stood up in front of their class and go, AI's here. I know you're using it. I want to use it. Here's the lesson plan for, here's the syllabus for semester. How do you think we should use AI? You see
Nice.
this lesson coming up next week? Should we incorporate it? What do you think? Let's talk about this together.
I
What an
love that.
incredible journey for the students and for the professor.
Yeah, I mean, it just empowers, it gives agency to everybody. One of the things about your career, it spanned really high stakes environments. I mean, you were in the special forces, you've worked in companies as an entrepreneur, you've been in law. What these experiences, how do they shape your approach to uncertainty? And what are you learning from that in the context of being in a company and also really an educator at the same time? What are those experiences? What are some of these uncertainties that you've engaged with? How is this being transferred to your context today? And what might be some things our audience might want to consider?
Yeah, John, I do a lot of podcasts. No one's ever asked me that question. That is a really, really interesting question. Look, I think personalities are different. You can tell by my background, I'm someone who enjoys uncertainty, right? Finds it challenging, finds it stimulating. I know not everyone is wired that way. That being said, right, uncertainty, I think, is where opportunity is, right? And I think that's why I enjoy uncertainty, because I am driven by three things, right? One is a desire to serve. The second is a true belief in the power of collaboration. And three, I would not have been able to do all those things that you listed off embarrassingly at the beginning of the podcast if it wasn't for the education I received, right? I'm a refugee from Vietnam. I came over on a plane from Saigon when I was 18 months old. And it's only because of the incredible educational experience I've had, West Point, Washburn, law school, right, at Georgetown, that I've been able to do the things I do. And so, that drives me, I think, to places where I can serve and make a difference. And that often puts me in places that are quote unquote high risk, right? And where there's a lot of uncertainty. I think with uncertainty, right? I gave a talk just the other day about how to overcome and deal with adversity. And one of the techniques that I really espouse is just radical acceptance. I mean, what does that mean? It just means you're in the situation you're in. So what are you going to do now, right? Like, don't bemoan the context, just accept it and then move from there. And then part of that, of course, is figuring out the things you can control, right? And then the things you can't control. And when I was, I'll just take combat, for example. That's probably one of the highest stakes environment we talk about. The key to combat for me was, look, here's a list of things I can control that's inside the box. I'll control that. Everything outside of that is without my control. And I'm just going to accept it. I'm just going to not worry about those things. And so, in the context, I think, of AI and education, it can feel like everything is beyond our control, right? That things are moving so fast. But really, right, there is a lot within your control, right? You can control, your view towards the technology. You can control how much you educate yourself. You can control whether or not how you approach it in the classroom. It is your classroom, right? You can control whether you acknowledge the fact that it is here and it's not going away. And you can control, the relationship you have with your students.
I think what I love about that is the idea that within uncertainty, even though there's uncertainty around you, there is a component or there's a part that you control. And I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's about identifying what are the things within all that uncertainty and the context that you might be, that you can actually engage with and feel some ownership and feel some ability to say, okay, I can work with this. The rest I can't. I'll be at peace with that, but let me focus on the things that I can really work on. And I love the way you kind of just created that box and said, these things inside here, I can do that. And I think for, educators, if sometimes at first, that first sense of overwhelmingness comes to you, it's about maybe taking a breath and saying, okay, these are some things I can do.
Yeah, it's all interesting. One of the other things I talked about in this talk I gave about strategies for adversity was this idea of reframing. Why do two people in the same circumstances, one thinks it's terrific and it's amazing, another one bemoans that this is terrible, right? It's all about your perspective and your framing. And that is so true when it comes to AI in the classroom. I talk to professors who believe, initially this is the worst thing ever, the profession is over. And I talk to other professors who are teaching the same subject, maybe even at the same school, are like, this is the best thing ever. Look at all this opportunity this creates. So clearly one of them is looking at this differently than the other, right? I'm not saying one is right or wrong. Both perspectives are equally valid. But, reframing is a very powerful tool. And I think with regards to AI, just to be very specific, yes, the first experience we had with AI was students producing the artifacts that used to be the product that showed they comprehended, they exercised critical thinking, right? Write an essay about whatever. Well, those products are no longer good products to measure critical thinking and creativity. That is a loss to some educators, right, who really relied upon that. On the flip side, we have all kinds of opportunities now, right? One of the things I recently did in the platform to show one of the new functions we had was I built a simulation of Yalta. So what is this? It allowed a student, instead of reading about Yalta, to actually be thrust into the Yalta conference and have to pick to be either Churchill or Stalin or Roosevelt. And they went through the conference being fed all the context and making the decisions. So what is more interesting for a student, reading about Yalta or being in Yalta, right? And the technology we have, the same technology that enables students to produce an essay, also enables a teacher to put that student into the Yalta conference.
That's amazing. And I think that's so true is when kids are immersed and able to interact in a real time or in a real simulation, there's just so much more engagement. I think it just grabs all the different learning styles into one. You talk about these, you gave the analogy of a professor at the same university with different perspectives, one maybe more cautious, the other one very excited. If you had a room full of school leaders and they were talking about professional development, what do you think teachers and educators, what should schools be doing to kind of develop these skills and values and the dispositions that you're sharing to really make sure that the kids that we're working with are adaptable, they're critical thinkers, and they kind of have that ethical awareness?
Yeah, so I divide the relationship between teaching and AI into three broad buckets, okay? The first is teaching with AI. In other words, we're going to use these tools to enhance teaching and learning, but in a way that is largely opaque to the student, right? So maybe we use AI to, revise our class plans. Maybe we use AI to do assessments and provide feedback better. Maybe we use AI to provide a tutor to the students so that they don't have to they don't understand the underlying technology, but it provides them a study partner, right, 24/7. That's teaching with AI. The second bucket is teaching about AI, which is actually teaching how to use these tools in the context of their education in a way that still preserves that friction, but sets them up to understand the tools so they're ready for this AI-enabled world we're in. The third bucket is teaching by AI, and I don't talk about that because I actually don't believe in it, right? I don't think that AI should substitute for what is the heart and core of teaching. Professors are more than just content delivery machines, right? There's so much more that goes into teaching. And so I think schools should think about the teaching with AI bucket and provide the tools and training to enable professors to teach with AI and students to learn with AI. And then, right, when they're ready, provide a framework for teaching about AI. And that includes things like AI literacy, how to use the tools that are out there, but more importantly, how to evaluate and think responsibly about these tools. Going back to the first part of our discussion about the ethical use of AI, we are now all both users and consumers of AI generated content, right? And I think we're just now at the start of our journey in being able to understand how to use that responsibly, right? And so I would focus teaching and training, professional development on those two pillars.
It's interesting how the third bucket that you highlighted, and you were quick to say, I don't believe in that. It's interesting because a lot of AI, if you look at some of the articles and the promise is that, oh, you can have an AI tutor, or now the teacher that has many different neurodiverse students could subcontract some of that work to some AI chatbots or some education apps. I'm kind of making this up. I don't know where the world is, but I get an idea. It's aspirational, but you're quite adamant. Could you maybe elaborate why you think just having kids interact with an AI that could be at the B- or even an A type of intelligence?
I think students should interact with AI, right? I gave the Yalta example. That's a student interacting with AI, but a professor still needs to be involved, right? Like ultimately, what should happen with that conversation? the students should be asked to reflect and provide that reflection back to the professor, or or that entire chat to be shared back to the professor. They can assess it, right? That is still teaching with AI. The professor is still intimately involved, right? I don't believe in wholesale replacement of educators by AI, right? And so kind of unsupervised, like the AI can just go out on its own. And the reason I don't is, like I said, there's, when a student comes to me, right, and asks for additional instruction, we don't just talk about class, right? We talk about their, how's school going? What do they want to do when they graduate? Where, they ask me about career advice. There is a human component to teaching that AI is never going to replace, right? Now, what AI could do, right, is enable us to maybe shoulder some of the burden of the more tedious things, such that we could focus on things that are more high value. And I think that is a really good use of AI, right? So the things that B- is okay, and we can give them AI to do with a student, right? Students to do with an AI, so we could focus on those things that are high value.
Yeah, and I think that that's always so important, is that you want your interactions with students always to be of highest value. And if you can subcontract some of the, what I say, more administrative tasks, or some of the things that get in the way, I think that is so important. Now, you have a company, and you have a team. What when you start creating this, you obviously had some strong ethical beliefs, you had some business beliefs, you very likely also had some beliefs of what the future could hold. How, as you have these ideas in yourself, do you then come to a group of people and say, listen, this is the vision, and then that vision and that mission and that philosophy and values keeps coming, is always there? Because often you get companies that begin with some intent, and then as they grow, different things change and the intent changes. Or do you feel that that's okay for the intent to change, or are you of the belief in your context with your company that that has to be a kind of almost sacred?
John, you're touching on one of my favorite subjects, which is culture, right? And what's interesting to me is when I talk to schools, colleges, universities, professors, they really, really care about the culture of my company. They really care about who is providing the technology and who's building this. So I will say one thing. You talked about me bringing like this passion, this vision to the company, to the employees. It's actually the opposite. So what do I mean by that? Culture isn't something that a leader can bring to a company. It's something that is created by the choices you make as a leader at the company. And it starts with who you let into the company. And so, you can't fundamentally change what people believe. So if I want a company full of people who believe in service and education and collaboration, I need to find and hire people like that, right? I can't instill that in somebody who doesn't innately have that. So we built that from the ground up. Like that is something, that is just part of the DNA. In fact, when I hire people, I'm the last person that talks to our hires, and I talk to them about culture. And I basically tell them, this is what we believe in. If you don't believe in it, then you shouldn't join us, no matter how experienced or expert you are in your field. The other thing that we've done is we really, really view what we do as a partnership with higher education. So, I really, this conundrum of AI disruption in education is not going to be solved by people just producing platforms and just throwing them out into the educational environment. But nor is it going to be solved the way it should be by educators just finding the tools that are out there and adapting them. They've done that. That is happening, and educators are, I'm not saying they haven't done a great job of that, but ultimately, right, we should partner together, right? Educators and technologists, educators who appreciate and understand, but are still cautious about technology, technologists who have an appreciation, if not an firsthand understanding of education, and come together. And so one of the first things we did was we created a collaborative AI leadership council with up to about 80 educators, everyone from deans of schools to writing instructors. And they are just a very important component. They give us a lot of feedback. And more importantly, they interact with my team, and my team gets a firsthand glimpse, right, at the challenges and the problems and the concerns that educators have. And likewise, interestingly enough, one of the voices we think should be more heard in this discussion of AI education is students.
Yeah.
So I went to an AI conference, and there was 850 attendees, and only 5 were students. So wow. We created a campus student AI leadership council. It's got about 70 students from all around the world, and they do a similar thing for us. They give us their feedback and their thoughts and their fears and concerns about AI. And so, it's really a triangle, right? It's these educators, it's these students, and it's us all working together to build the very best, technological solution that is still, rooted in pedagogy and in the real practical world that we now live in.
And I love the way that you, this often happens. You go to education conferences, you went to an AI conference, and, there are no students, and we're all talking about students.
Yeah.
You talk about this idea of being very deliberate and having these different voices and these different perspectives, and perspectives that might not know much about technology and business, but those voices are important for you and your team. Do you think that in this, because there are hundreds of education AI tools, every time I turn around, I get another email from some salesperson.
Sure.
Are we oversaturated? Is it kind of the gold rush, or is it just the beginning and now there are going to be more, there's going to be kind of a shakeout and you're going to see many of these disappear? I'm just wondering, how sustainable is it that everybody is bringing out these AI tools for educators?
Look, this is our free enterprise system, right? This is the free market. This is entrepreneurism, right? More companies are started in the US than any other place because people believe we have a place where people can have an idea, gather capital, build something, and then the market responds, right? And so I think having all these choices is great because then educators get to decide what's valuable to them. I'll tell you, as an entrepreneur, I really believe that great entrepreneurs are driven by desire to serve. And you serve by you build or you create something that helps other people. And it helps other people because they're willing to pay you for it, right? Like that's kind of like the clear signal, like we value what you built, right? And so people are going to decide what they value. Those companies are going to flourish, right? And this is a way of educators kind of influencing what gets built, which is great. And they should.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I love that you always bring back this word service, in the sense of that even though you're creating something, the end of the day, you want it to be a value added proposition to the people engaging with it. In your case, customers who are educators and professors. What is it in your own day to day that has generated this really strong sense of service? Because I'm not sure often there could be profit, there could be power, there are a lot of other things that come into play. But this theme of service, which I applaud and I love hearing it, keeps coming back. Why is it so important to you? And why is that front of center in your situation as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, look, John, I'm a very lucky person. I was born in a communist country. My father is a South Vietnamese army officer. My mother worked for the U.S. government. We were evacuated 3 days before Saigon fell in April of '73 by the U.S. government. I flew to Guam. My first place I lived in the United States was a GP medium tent on a Marine Corps base. We showed up in Washington State. A wonderful sponsor family took us in. That's going to be 50 years ago here in a couple of months. And then, I had a chance to go to West Point and then from there serve. And then, and then all these other things happened. And in my reason for wanting to serve was I felt that I owed something, right? I owed something, to America in general, but also specifically to the veterans that served in the Vietnam War and sacrificed for me and many like me. And so, that was the driving motivation when I was young to go to West Point and to serve. And on that path of service, a lot of people helped me along the way, John. And I just feel very blessed. And I always felt like you got to pay it forward, right? And people often ask me, like, what is the reward for a lifetime of service, right? Do you get rich? Do you get fame? Do you get fortune? And I was like, look, you may, right? And I think a lot of successful people are successful not because they try to be successful, because they do things they find are significant, right? They fill their life with purpose and with meaning, and that gives them motivation to go above and beyond, and that results in success, right? And success is a byproduct of doing the things you love. But I really think the reward for a lifetime of service is a lifetime of serving. Like, it is its own reward. And so I that it is the most satisfying thing to me, is be able to make a difference and to help other people. And it came from the fact that, deep in the back of my mind, there's an alternate universe where I have none of these opportunities, none of these opportunities to serve, none of these opportunities to get a great education, none of these opportunities to have opportunities to give back.
Wonderful. And when you were talking earlier, you said when you hire people at the end, you talk about culture. How do you know if somebody is in that same disposition and mindset of the idea of service and the reward is long life serving? What are some of the things that you look for? Because physically we all might look the same or a little change, but there has to be something that you notice. And I'm curious what that might be.
Yeah, so you can ask the folks who joined my companies. I have an interesting last interview. So, at that point, they've been vetted, they've learned all about the company, or, they've learned all about the opportunities, they've met other people, learned all the reasons they should join, all the great things we're doing. When they come interview with me, I tell them all the reasons they shouldn't join. Like, don't join if you don't believe in service. Don't join if you can't be afraid of being wrong in front of other people. Don't join if you're afraid to speak truth to power, right? Don't join if you're not willing to throw your all into something that we all believe in. And so I tell them all the reasons they shouldn't join. And then one of two things happens at the end, John. They either say, no, you're right, that's not for me. Or they're like, that's all the reasons I want to join. In fact, those things excite me. And that does two things, right? One is it filters out people, but second, it puts people on notice, right? Like, this is why we're here.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I think, sometimes doing telling people this is why you shouldn't join is very unusual, and they're very likely not expecting that, right? Especially as the last stage of the CEO and I think there's something to be said about shifting the question or turning the tables, and it really feels like you turn the tables on them and say, these are all the reasons why you should join. I'm going to tell you all the things that are going to be potentially horrible, but for some people, that's the incitement. That's just so rich. Tell me, you have Boodlebox. This is a company that's growing. You've been involved. It's very innovative. Give us a quick synopsis. What is it different from other chat interfaces or large language model? Because it's quite unique. Maybe can you give us a quick overview just to give us an idea what people might think is different than others?
Yeah, so Boodlebox, right? We are building a collaborative Gen AI platform for lifelong learning with AI and lifelong work, right? Lifelong learning about AI and lifelong work with AI, right? And I think there's 5 things that make it unique. First, we provide unlimited access to all the premium models in one place. So it's a one-stop shop. We figured out a way to run all these models such that we use 80% less tokens. So that's 80% less environmental impact, that's 80% less energy consumption, but that's also 80% less cost. So it's very cost effective and sustainable. Second, we really have built on this idea of collaboration. So inside Boodlebox, there's all kinds of ways to collaborate that are really powerful. You can orchestrate, in other words, one person can use multiple AIs together. And you can also do group collaboration. You can have multiple people and multiple AIs. And that allows you to have a lot of transparency. So that allows a student to show their work to a professor on how they're using AI. And if a professor can see a student's work, they can assess it, they can teach to it, it becomes part of the lesson, right? Third, we are 100% focused on higher education. So we provide enterprise-grade security and data privacy. We don't train models. We anonymize all your prompts. We check all the blocks for FERPA and HECVATs and VPATs that are required to operate in a higher education environment. And lastly, and I think perhaps most importantly, right, we're designed to be a lifelong platform for learning and working about AI. So there's complete data portability. A student could use it on day 1 of college, spend 4 years using it in courses, building bots, having conversations, uploading materials, creating chat threads. And when they graduate, they can take it with them. And that becomes an incredibly powerful AI portfolio that they can use for the rest of their professional career.
I love the idea of the transportability, because so often, even like in the Google workspace for education, when kids graduate, bingo, everything disappears unless they do quite an elaborate move. So that's really nice, this idea of portability. What for you has been the most challenging in trying to create something where it's really about human collaboration, where the AI and the human are cohabitating together, and really the user is the one that's kind of curating the conversations and creating the dynamics between the different large language models within your ecosystem? What has been the most challenging in trying to get there?
Yeah, one of the challenges of building an innovative company on top of early adopted technology, right, is, are you just a moment too soon in time, right? So we are, every time new technology comes out, it takes a bit of time for us to understand how to use it properly, right? So, we have decades of experience using word processors in Excel. And I know that comes like, of course, everyone knows how to use it, but there was a time, right? When the first word processor in Excel was like, what do I do with this, right? Like no one had to show you how to use those things. You just know now, right? Google, right? We have a couple of decades of experience Googling things and we understand, right? Like the links come out, I need to check them, like it's secondhand. We have 2 years of experience with generative AI. We don't have the muscle memory, right? The biggest challenge is for a lot of people, that chatbot box that's sitting empty is a world of promise because it could do anything. For other people, it's paralyzing because I don't know where to start. And so that 0 to 1 hurdle of getting in and having people know how to use it, that is the biggest challenge, I think, of using generative AI. And it's one of the things we're focused on helping professors and students overcome.
Why did you decide to go in the education market? Because with your background in many different areas, you have a law degree, you have experience in the military. What was it that attracted you to the education field?
Yeah, so Budabox was originally built as a workforce tool. It is, and it still is. It is used by hundreds of users, thousands of use cases across dozens of industries. And so that's actually one of the, I think, its pluses as an education platform because it is literally the same tool that students can use when they graduate and go to the workforce, right? So why not focus on the workforce? Here's the thing. We're in this place of AI adoption where a lot of industries want to adopt AI, but they don't need to adopt AI, right? In other words, like if you're an accounting firm, you're already solving all your core accounting problems. Nothing's being terribly disrupted. You want to incorporate AI because it makes you more efficient and more effective and better, but you can do it this quarter, or you could do it next quarter, or you could do it next year. That is not true in education, right? AI is in the classroom and is causing disruption now. So where are the most important conversations happening about AI, the relationship between AI and people? Where is this muscle memory development occurring, right? Who is figuring out this relationship? It's, for folks listening, it's your classrooms. You're at the very front edge of humankind's development of a relationship with AI. And so I'm very concerned about that relationship because if we get it right, it's a boon. If we get it wrong, it could be bad, right? And so education is where that's going to occur. And so I want to be there as part of that discussion.
It's so interesting how you say like an accountant could not use it, could wait 6 months, and that no, in education there's no choice. Why is it like that in education and not in business then?
Yeah, because students, right? Students, I think saw a survey, 80-90% of students are using it, whether they're using it with or without permission, they're using it. That is causing disruption, whether education institutions and professors want it or not, right? So that is an unavoidable disruption. And that is forcing this conversation, right? Budabox is, we've had 400 requests for pilots from 325 different schools in the last 6 months alone. This is clearly, right, top of mind for education. So
yeah. When you think of everything that's happening, there's the excitement, what you're super excited. But what is one of your cautions, or you think is like, well, this is something that I'm a little not feeling 100% sure about or feeling very good about? What's the one thing that just excites you, and then maybe your caution for yourself as you engage in this industry and with this powerful technology?
Yeah, there's this great series on the History Channel. It's called "The Men Who Built America," and unfortunately, it was all men back then. It's about the Gilded Age and about the titans of the time, right? Rockefeller and oil, and Vanderbilt and railroads, and Ford and the assembly line, and talk about how these industries dramatically changed not just business but society, the world, right? We are undergoing another, obviously, industrial revolution, and it's another Gilded Age, but it's not railroads connecting us, it's social networks, right? And it's not oil, it's data that is fueling this change. And it's not assembly lines changing manual labor, it's AI automating human intellectual labor, right? And so that is going to cause a massive amount of disruption. And in that, there's exciting opportunities, because I think there are ways we can harness that for good, right? Like the development of the assembly line managed to take the drudgery out of the creation of a lot of things, but it also changed, millions of people's livelihoods, some, for the worse and some for the better. So we've got to navigate that. So my big fear, right, is that we don't navigate that well, right? Like I said, we don't get that relationship right. My hope is that we do, and that we can unlock, right, even more human potential, right? That some of the things that we can outsource to AI, the drudgery, will allow us to focus on those things that really matter. And what really matters, it's this, John, right? It's me and you talking. It's connecting with other people. It's doing the things that are innately human that no AI will ever be able to do, right? And maybe AI can give us the chance to be more human, not less human.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, and that, sometimes AI allows us to self-reflect on our own humanity much more, because we start questioning ourselves. Do you think then, for a school leader in an international school or a public school or educators, is it a non-negotiable not to be engaging and thinking of this critically, thinking about professional development, of training, of having those ethical conversations, talking to the community, the parents? Do you think if schools are not engaging with this with purpose and very explicitly, that is something they need to think about?
Look, I have lots of talks with educators at all levels, from professors to administrators, CIOs, librarians. I've heard more than one leader say something along the lines of, we have to engage in this now, because if we don't, it's pedagogical malpractice.
Wow.
So, and those are not my words. That is words from leaders in the field.
Yeah. And what do you say to teachers that resist, or educators that resist this? And they're like, I don't have the time. It's too fast. I'm about to retire. Or not even retiring. I don't want to do any ageism, because look at me. I'm just, what about if people say, I just can't keep up and I don't think I need to, or I don't have the will?
Look, one of the things I love about the academy, right, is the diversity. And I think students should have a choice. So somebody asked, like, well, what do you do if a student shows up in the class and you have AI and they say, I don't want to have AI? I was like, well, what one school has done is they've actually labeled all their courses. This is AI free, this is AI optional or AI enabled, this is AI required. And students have a choice, right? So we need professors like that, actually. Like, we need the professors like, there is no calculators in my classroom, you're gonna do everything by hand, right? And the students can choose, right, where they want that. So I don't think all of higher education should do that, right? And I think institutions need to embrace that this is coming and changing. But at the professor level, I think we should have professors who are like, I'm not using any AI whatsoever. You have to handwrite everything in my class, and students can choose where they're on. Students should have that academic choice.
Yeah, I think that's great. Also, giving them an opportunity to try different things with different approaches.
Yeah.
Francis, this has been amazing. And we could talk for many more hours. There's so much that you're sharing, and I really like that last quote, not engaging with AI is pedagogical malpractice. That's going to sit in my head for a while. Our audience are international school educators, people from around the world, and we have school leaders. We usually ask at the end if there is something you think people should reflect upon as an educator in a classroom or in a school context, and then a school leader. For each of those stakeholders, what are some things that you would want just to provoke them in thinking as we wrap up?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go back to the student, right? You are now a student. You're in your first day of college, right? In this world, it's changing rapidly. AI is out there. You're going to have to graduate. You're going to have to get a job. You're going to have to work in this world. What is the educational experience you want? Right? Like, put yourself back in the shoes of a student, right? And I think if we start with that question, right, I think that's not a bad touchstone for these discussions, this wrestling we're having with technology and with policy and with pedagogy.
I think that touchstone idea that you just shared is so important because so often we're always looking through the lens of our own experiences of school, and parents often are coming to school and looking for their experience of school.
Mhm.
But that experience, unfortunately, is something in the past, and really the present is somehow tomorrow. And I think your provocation of really saying I'm a student now. What should I learn? What should I need? I just think is so powerful. Francis, thank you so much again for being part of the podcast. I want to tell our audience we have show notes. So do go to Boodlebox if you've not had a chance. There's a free account. I've tried it. It's super interesting, very powerful, and there's a lot of resources. And I think it definitely is something to explore if you haven't, just to see the interface. And I love the fact that there are these conversations with the AI and the human beings in this collaborative approach where there is both worlds coming together and really working as a process and thinking and critical thinking and creating these immersive experiences like you just shared of the Yalta conference and a student experiencing being in that conference and engaging with that. Francis, thank you so much. Our audience, again, thank you for your feedback, and also many of you responded to the survey. We so appreciate it. And then people are joining our LinkedIn, and people share comments and reshare and like, and we are super grateful and really appreciative. So thank you for being our listeners. And Francis, thank you again for being with us. And we look forward to maybe connecting here again sooner than later and finding out how Boodlebox and yourself are doing and kind of navigating all this accelerated change. It's both exciting and sometimes daunting.
Great. Thank you, John. It's been a pleasure.